It's now time for question period. I recognize the member of His Majesty's Loyal Opposition.
Thank you, Speaker. I seek unanimous consent that the House calls on the government to reverse its proposed changes to the Ontario Student Assistance Program.
The member of His Majesty's Loyal Opposition is seeking unanimous consent that the House call on the government to reverse its proposed changes to the Ontario Student Assistance Program. Agreed?
No.
Agreed. Question period. I recognize the Leader of His Majesty's Loyal Opposition.
Thank you, Speaker. And welcome back, everyone. This question is for the Premier. The Premier has announced he is dismantling Ontario's freedom of information laws to hide from accountability and take away the people's right to know how their hard-earned tax dollars are being spent. This is a huge violation of the public's trust. They are taking us backwards, Speaker, in accountability and transparency. So I would ask the Premier to explain why is his government taking away the people's right to see how decisions are made and who is benefiting?
I recognize the Premier of Ontario.
Through you, Mr. Speaker. Through you, Mr. Speaker, we aren't taking anyone's rights away. 95% will be FOIable. That's number one. Number two, all we're doing is duplicating other provinces, no matter if it's Saskatchewan or Quebec, for example, but the rest of the provinces and the federal government. We're duplicating what the federal government has done. The only thing we haven't done, we should have moved a lot quicker on this. But again, 95%, I'm going to emphasize that, is FOIable. There's two groups that are concerned about it. It's the opposition that they should talk to their federal partners and the media. Everyone else is focused on something else. They're focused on the economy, about jobs, fighting President Trump. That is what they're focused on. So we'll let them, chirp away, but we're going to focus on the economy.
Back to the Leader of His Majesty's Loyal Opposition.
Well, Speaker, the Premier has been pretty clear, actually, with the public already about why he's making these changes. He said himself that this is about concealing his cell phone records. Yep. The cell phone that he admitted he conducts government business on. The courts have ordered for those records to be shared, to be released. The province's own accountability watchdog has said that this is all about evading accountability. Yep. So I would ask the Premier, protect Ontario? No. This is only about protecting himself. What is in those cell phone records that the Premier is trying so very hard to hide?
Back to the Premier of Ontario.
Madam Speaker, I'll tell you what's inside these phone calls. 6,743 messages that people need help. They need help no matter if it's health care, family issues, and you know why they don't have to worry about it? I'm the only person in the world that gives out his cell number to help people. That's the difference. They don't get any phone calls. They're all right to put out publicly personal information about people. So when the constituents don't even call you because they don't get a call back, but if they were to call them and tell them personal health issues, do you think for a second anyone in this province wants to release personal information? That's what this is all about. That is what it's all about, taking care of the people, personal issues. You have no problem with airing people's issues around the province. I have an issue with that. I took an oath, like each and every one of you, to protect the people that call you and their information.
Final supplementary, Leader of the Opposition.
Well, they've sure got issues, Premier. But those issues are with the cost of everything. They're with the hallway health care that has exploded under your watch. They are with the lack of funding for OSAP. That's what people here are worried about. But you seem to be consumed, for some reason, with hiding your cell phone records. And we know it's not about hiding constituent information because that is already covered and protected, and the Premier knows absolutely why. The timing of these changes is very suspicious, Premier. The RCMP is clearly closing in on this government. They're going to reveal each government member's involvement in the Greenbelt scandal. And let me tell you, Speaker, they're not going to be coming with FOI laws. They're going to be coming with a warrant. Multiple recipients of skills development funds, closely tied to this Premier, to this Labour Minister. And now the Premier is in court fighting to keep his cell phone records private. Is the Premier changing the rules because he is trying to hide the truth?
I recognize the Minister of Public and Business Service Delivery and Procurement.
Thank you very much, Speaker. And thank you to the member opposite for allowing me the opportunity to talk about what this legislation is actually doing. And I can tell you it's long overdue. What we are doing with this legislation, Speaker, is updating and strengthening cabinet confidentiality, which is certainly the bedrock of the Westminster system. If we look across Canada to New Brunswick, to Newfoundland, to PEI, to Quebec, Alberta, BC, Manitoba, all these provinces and the federal government have one thing in common. They have rules around cabinet confidentiality. I think everyone here should be able to understand that most basic principle. There is still absolutely complete, and there will be, transparency over decisions that are made by this government. That is how people will judge the government. That will still be open. And as the Premier alluded to, over 95% of what is accessible today will still be accessible through the FOI process.
Question. I recognize the Leader of His Majesty's Loyal Opposition.
Speaker, the member opposite knows perfectly well that cabinet confidentiality is already protected in existing laws. Nobody's buying that. But to the Premier, I'm going to go back to him because I'm going to ask a question on behalf of every young person in this province. It has never been harder to be a young person in Ontario than it is today. Youth unemployment is an all-time high. The cost of rent and groceries and gas is through the roof. Higher education already feels out of touch to almost every young person today and their families. But this Premier decided over his extended break to make it even more difficult. Why is the Premier turning his back on the next generation?
I recognize the Minister of Colleges and Universities.
Thank you, Speaker. I'd like to address some of the NDP Liberal narrative that the government is getting rid of OSAP. The Leader of the Opposition just stated the lack of funding for OSAP. OSAP is not going away. We've made that very, very clear. The changes we're making to OSAP, Speaker, are to ensure it is sustainable so that this program can be around for the next generation of students behind these students, Speaker. They'll continue to get the support they need when accessing higher education. If our government had not acted like myself and the Premier have clearly articulated, we would have decimated OSAP, putting student access at risk and a massive burden on the taxpayer. But let me remind you, Speaker, under the Liberal McGuinty-Wynne government, the grant-to-loan ratio was actually only 15% grants until 2017, Speaker. That's less grants than we just currently introduced.
Response.
When the grants were flipped to 85% grants, the Auditor General made it very clear that it is unsustainable. You know the Auditor General clearly articulated your changes.
Back to the... I would ask the members in opposition and members of the third party to come to order. Back to the Leader of His Majesty's Loyal Opposition.
Speaker, the government has decimated OSAP. Decimated it. Nobody is buying that line of argument. You are saddling Ontario's young people with a lifetime of debt. Okay, I want to be very clear. I have met nurses over the last few months who are going to have to withdraw from their programs or face debt until they're in their 40s. Okay, students who rely on OSAP are going to have to pay $3,500 more per year, and that is on top of what the federal government, the federal Liberals, are already adding $1,200 per year to student loans, right? Look at those numbers. Look at those numbers. A lot of students are deciding that they're going to have to go give up on university or college, and we're talking PSWs and ECEs and teachers and healthcare workers. They're turning down their offers because they cannot afford it, Speaker. That's what we've been hearing. I know you're hearing it too. I gave this government a chance to do the right thing this morning, but I'll ask the Premier again, will you do the right thing and reverse your OSAP cuts?
That back to the Minister of Colleges and Universities.
Thank you, Speaker. I know it's been a while since the Leader of the Opposition was a member of the Rae government. Speaker, under the Rae government, tuition went up 50%, 3 times the rate of inflation. That was under your watch. That was under your watch. It was. And under the Liberals, it went up 83%.
Through the Speaker.
Tuition went up 83%. Again, triple the rate of inflation. If you were in power right now, tuition would be over $14,000 a year if you were in power, because history speaks for itself. Speaker, our new grant-to-loan ratio is right in line with other provinces, including the NDP friends in Manitoba and BC, Speaker. When the Leader of the Opposition was in front of the media in February, she said, we'd like to get the place where other provinces are at, Speaker. Great news. We did exactly that. We're in line with the rest of the other provinces.
Final supplementary, the Leader of His Majesty's Loyal Opposition.
Speaker, so there you go, right? That is this government's message to young people, to families out there. And I got to tell you, that's devastating. It's devastating, Speaker. Because I can tell you, everybody we've met with, everybody, the thousands and thousands of young people we have heard from over the last few months have been very clear that they cannot afford this government. They cannot afford this government. And clearly, based on what that minister said, they are on their own. Yes. They are on their own. People out there are working harder than they've ever worked before just to make ends meet, and you are shutting down the future of the next generation. Yeah. Yes. Why is this Premier punishing young people instead of investing in their future? And I hope he has the guts to stand up and answer the question.
Minister. Order. Minister of Colleges and Universities.
Thank you, Speaker. I'll remind the Leader of the Opposition it was our government that cut and froze tuition for the last 8 years, Speaker, when high inflation. Speaker, we have saved the average university student $1,800 a year on tuition and $450 a year for the average college student. But, Speaker, the sector has changed significantly since the federal government has made many unilateral changes. Speaker, we are there for the students, whether it's the Ontario Learn and Stay grant that has had almost 13,000 health human resource students go through our system with free tuition, free books covered by our government, as well as the First Nations Mining Scholarship that has the first cohort of students enrolled this January, $10 million, Speaker. Higher education is an investment students make in themselves, in their community and their future, and our government will always be there to support that investment in a sustainable and responsible way for hard-paying taxpayers.
Question. I recognize the Leader of the Third Party.
Thank you very much, Speaker. It's good to see you. You know, it's been, I think, 102 days since we were all last here, and I know the Premier hopes that we all forgot things like $10 million to a strip club owner, or $2 million to the family dentist, or the mess that's Keel Digital Solutions. That's not going to happen, Speaker. No one is going to be forgetting this Premier or this government's record on anything. The longer rot sits, the more it stinks. And the Premier's latest stinker is changing FOI laws retroactively. There must be something really, really, really bad on that phone, Premier. So, Speaker, after 8 years, does the Premier think he can hide from any of his record?
I recognize the Minister of Public and Business Service Delivery and Procurement.
Yeah, thank you very much, Speaker, and thank you to the member opposite for the question. Good to see you again. It gives me an opportunity today to highlight what we are doing with this legislation, which is well overdue. This legislation that it will be replacing is almost 40 years old. So to put that into perspective, that was even before the disastrous Bob Rae government. This was before cloud computing, before text, before WhatsApp, before artificial intelligence, well before that. So the legislative framework we have for FOI and cybersecurity in this province is well outdated. So that's why we're making changes. Now, what are we doing? First, we're strengthening cabinet confidentiality, number one. Number two, we're modernizing the privacy and access framework for FOI in the province of Ontario. And third, we're strengthening cybersecurity and enhancing protection for children. The current cybersecurity network in Ontario is outdated. We will be bringing in regulations with EDSTA that we passed a year or two ago, the Enhancing Digital Security and Trust Act, to expand cyber protection through the broader public sector. That will include hospitals, school boards, children's aid societies, among other institutions. So we're excited that we will have a more strong, united, protected Ontario.
Back to the Leader of the Third Party.
So, Speaker, why is the Premier hiding? It's because after 8 long years, everything is worse. Life is harder. Class sizes keep going up. Unemployment, up. Holiday health care, up. People without a family doctor, up. Electricity and heating costs, up. And crime, too. Crime, it's up too, Speaker. And don't take it from me. Just ask the Premier. And after 8 years, it's all on him. So, Madam Speaker, how does the Premier think he can hide from his record of making life harder and less safe for Ontario families?
Recognize the Premier of Ontario.
You know, Madam Speaker, this is real ironic coming from the Liberal member that destroyed our province for 15 years, chased 300,000 jobs out of the province, and every piece of legislation that we put forward, they voted against. They voted against building infrastructure to $223 billion, building the 413 and Bradford bypass to get goods to market sooner, to get people home sooner. They voted against building 60 additions or new hospitals around the province. They voted against it. They voted against, obviously, and you're dead against the airport to create economic development and 23,000 jobs. They voted against our great nuclear program that's going to create 150,000 jobs. They voted against the Ring of Fire and the critical minerals. That's the reason they lost 300,000 jobs since we've been in office. There's over 1 million more people working. We're going to continue giving people opportunities to thrive and prosper and grow.
Back to the Leader of the Third Party.
8 years, Premier. 8 years. And life is harder under this government and this Premier. They're tired, out of gas, and out of touch. And everything is going up. And the only thing that I can find that's going down is the Premier's popularity. And that's easy to understand, because when all you do is talk, at some point people finally realize that you just can't deliver on the things that are important to them. So, Speaker, I'll ask the Premier again. Does he actually think he can hide from his record of making life harder for Ontario families for 8 years?
Back to the Premier of Ontario.
To the member over there, he mentioned the word gas. They voted against 10.7 cents a litre. Imagine if they were in power, pro-carbon tax, another 10, 11 cents on top of the gas. They vote against absolutely everything that puts money into people's pockets. We cut the cost of doing business and off the backs of people by $12 billion a year. They voted against the one fare that can save riders up to $1,700. They voted against getting rid of the tolls because they're the ones who put the tolls in. We got rid of the tolls on 412, 418, saving families $5,000 to $7,000 a year. And you know something? I know he likes talking about polls. You know, the only poll that counts is on Election Day. Just to let him know, the PCs are at 45%, Liberals are at 28, 29, and the Dippers are at 21. I got to help the Dippers get up a little bit. But if the election was held today, we would have a larger majority today than we did last year.
I recognize the Leader of the Third Party.
The Premier's talking so much, we need to get him a Truth Social account. Anyhow, and you want to know what else is up? You want to know what else is up? The provincial debt. It's closing in on $500 billion. $500 billion. And as the Premier would say, hey, folks, that's historic. It is. But you want to know what other debt is up? The debt of young people and their families who are trying to get a degree, a diploma, or a trade. And that's because that guy over there decided that he was going to break OSAP. He's making life harder for them. He's piling on those families. Life's already hard. Why is he piling on? And after 8 long years, does the Premier really think he can hide from his record of making life harder for Ontario families?
Premier of Ontario.
That's why we have elections and we kick their asses 3 times in a row, okay? I apologize. But we kicked their butts 3 times in a row, and we're going to kick their butts 4 times.
Please withdraw.
I retract that. But anyways, let's talk about OSAP. They voted, when we came into office, we knocked off 10% tuition. They increased tuition by 83%. We kept that tuition down for 8 years. Now they're getting their tuition reduction by 8%. All they do is want to tax people to death, put their hands in their pockets. That's what they believe in, tax and spend. We believe in putting money into people's pockets until they have more money to go out there, maybe go for dinner, maybe put a little addition on, buy their kids clothes. Not under the Liberal and NDP governments. They gouged them to death. Highest taxes ever in the history of Ontario from the NDP and the Liberals.
Back to the Leader of the Third Party.
Speaker, they can't do that, and the Premier's making them to go into debt just to give their kids opportunity. So after 8 long years, what are Ontarians left with? And what does the Premier say to that mum or dad in Sault Ste. Marie who just lost their job at Algoma when their son or daughter says, you know, Mom, Dad, I want to go to school. I want to get a trade. Just exactly what do they say? The Premier is making life harder. I know he can't see it. It's harder for people in Windsor. It's harder for people in Amherstburg. It's harder for people in Brampton. It's harder for people all across Ontario. Name any city. So why is the Premier making life even harder for young families? Speaker, is the Premier proud, actually proud of his record of making life harder for Ontario families?
I recognize the Minister of Finance.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker. You know what? In the 15 years that the member opposite was in government, you know what they did? They taxed everything and they built nothing. Shame. And that's why they are over there now, Madam Speaker, because this government is building everything in this province. Madam Speaker, we are building hospitals, we're building schools, we're building energy and nuclear, we're building highways, we're building transit, we're building long-term care. You want me to keep going? Yeah, of course we're building houses. We're getting everything built across this province. And you know what that does, Madam Speaker? That puts people to work. What a concept. We put the great people of Ontario to work. That's what a government does.
I recognize the member of the Leader of the Third Party.
Thank you. There is a whole bunch of people on the front lawn today, and that's because the Premier and the Minister has made their life harder. They've made their schools not safe places to learn or to work. Not just OSAP, not just post-secondary.
Order.
Class sizes are too big. They went up. Right? Right, Premier? Special education's been starved. More kids not getting their needs met. Up. And a mental health crisis that this Premier has just skated right by in schools. And they're on the front lawn today. You've made life harder for them. So are you proud that you've made life harder for all those people and those kids on the front lawn today? Thank you.
I recognize the Premier.
This is a person that was in charge of long-term care. In 15 years, built 600 beds. Our great minister is up to 30,000 long-term care homes. 30,000 long-term care homes. This was the member that voted against closing 600 schools. We're building $23 billion of new schools under our great Minister of Education. That's what we're doing. All you want to do is, like you did last time, you put us in debt, record debt that we've never seen before. You drove up the deficit. You dismantled jobs.
Order.
We're creating jobs.
Order.
We're creating opportunities. And folks, there's 1 million more people working today than there was when you were in office. You chased 300,000 jobs out of this province.
question. I recognize the member for Parkdale High Park.
Thank you, Speaker. Speaker, today in the gallery is Chris Sameo. He should be here with his son, Max. But Max is not here because Max died when he was excluded from school. There are 100,000 other kids in Ontario experiencing school exclusions, and the number one reason is there is not enough support to keep them safe in our schools. Families and experts have been sounding the alarm for 8 years now, and they are out on our front lawn again today. Can the Premier please tell Chris, his wife Emily, their other kids, what he will do to ensure that no other family in Ontario experiences a tragedy like this?
I recognize the Minister of Education.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Well, Madam Speaker, let me just say this. Obviously, our hearts go out to the parents who are in the gallery today. This is obviously something that is heartbreaking, and I think all of the legislature has nothing but the greatest amount of sympathy for what these parents have gone through. I'm sure that they don't care to hear the money that is being spent in the system or the supports that are being spent in the system. I think all they care about really is the fact that they lost a loved one and that they expect better, and that things change as a result of that, and we'll make sure that it does.
I recognize the member for Ottawa West of Dean.
Every single day there are thousands of children like Max around the province, children who should be in school, who have every right to be in school, but aren't because the supports are not there for them. This government has cut more than $6 billion from our schools. More than 5,000 educators gone since 2018. That is an utterly shameful record. So I'm going to ask the Premier one more time, can he please tell Max's parents directly, what is he going to do now to ensure there are no more tragedies and that every child in Ontario is able to go to school?
Minister of Education.
Thank you again, Madam Speaker. Look, Madam Speaker, my answer is not going to change. The reality is I have nothing but the greatest amount of sympathy for what these parents are going through and what they have endured. People of the province of Ontario expect the best from their education system. I expect the best from our education system, as do all members of the caucus on this side. That is why we've taken aggressive actions to make sure that our education system is responsive to students, parents, and teachers. We will continue on that mission, Madam Speaker, because it is absolutely critically important that our school system does just that. It meets the needs of parents, it meets the needs of students, and it meets the needs of teachers who just simply want the best for the kids that they are educating. So we're going to make sure that we continue on this mission of revamping and re-energizing our school system so that it is the absolute best in the not only in Canada but in the world. A $43 billion investment should have better results. I absolutely agree with that, and we'll make sure it does.
I recognize the member for Toronto St. Paul's.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and good morning. And my question is to the Premier. The government's proposed changes to the Freedom of Information Act would give ministers and parliamentary staff a get-out-of-jail-free card. These laws exist to hold those in power accountable, not to shield them when it's inconvenient. If the Premier is so concerned about risk, why is the solution to reduce transparency from his own office instead of strengthening accountability for Ontarians?
Back to the Premier.
So I have an idea. Why doesn't the member call the Prime Minister their federal cousins, call their federal cousins, call their local MPs, and ask them why we're duplicating exactly what they have. Ask them that their staff and MPPs and ministers and the Prime Minister are not handing over their records. Do you know why? Because 95% there, 95% here, we're duplicating what they have. I find this, Madam Speaker, double standard, hypocrisy at its best. We're duplicating the federal government. That's what we're doing. So call your cousins up in Ottawa and ask them why they aren't doing it. But you won't. You won't call them. I'll call them for you.
Premier, I'm going to ask you to withdraw the word hypocrisy.
I'm sorry?
Hypocrisy. Back to the member for...
We have all kinds of ideas to strengthen transparency and accountability for this government that were proposed today, but I still have to say, the question is why? It's simple. Why is this on-the-run government moving to change the rules retroactively? Conveniently, right after a court rules that the Premier must hand over his cell phone records. Ontarians deserve transparency. So the question is simple, Madam Speaker. Again, what is the Premier trying to hide?
Minister of Public and Business Service Delivery.
Yeah, thank you again to the member opposite. This legislation is long overdue. This legislation that will be being replaced is almost 40 years old, as I mentioned, so long overdue. What we are doing, as the Premier mentioned, is aligning with other jurisdictions in Canada. Just about every province, the federal government, and not only actually in Canada, Speaker. Let's take a global look. Let's look at the Westminster democracies, Australia, New Zealand, Ireland, Australia, similar laws, Speaker. But what's really interesting coming from that party is talking about transparency, because I remember in 2018, when I was first elected, the first issue we had to deal with was a hidden $15 billion deficit that the previous Liberal government had hid from everybody in the province of Ontario. And we, as a result of that, brought in a new Fiscal Transparency Act. I thank the Minister of Finance at the time for doing that, for bringing openness and transparency to the province of Ontario.
Right on. I recognize the member for Renfrew, Nipissing, Pembroke.
Well, thank you, Speaker. My question is for the Minister of Energy and Mines. Speaker, this year's PDAC convention was historic. The world is turning to Ontario and Canada, and under the previous Liberal government, Ontario was paralyzed by delay and red tape. Our government is taking a different approach. In less than 1 year, we reformed the permit process and introduced key initiatives from a new critical minerals strategy and processing fund to a critical minerals innovation fund and support for early exploration. As a result, Ontario took centre stage as a global mining powerhouse, showcasing our leadership in delivering major projects with speed. Speaker, as global demand for minerals like nickel, lithium, chromium, and cobalt continue to surge, countries are looking for stable, reliable partners with the resources, workforce, and supply chains to meet that demand. Ontario has what the world needs. Speaker, can the Minister outline how our government's reforms are building momentum and gaining traction among global investors and governments?
Recognize the Minister of Energy and Mines.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I want to thank the member from Renfrew, Nipissing, Pembroke for his leadership, and more than anything else, I want to thank members of this caucus for standing firm in defence of ethical resources. You know, Madam Speaker, leadership is about challenging the status quo. And when we inherited from the former Liberals a permitting system that was the second slowest in the OECD. In the industrialized world, we were among the slowest on earth. And our Premier challenged the status quo and demanded better. We reduced the permit times by half. One project, one process that has resulted in Ontario, for the first time in the history of this country, emerging as Canada's top place to invest, number 2 in the world from 15. And that didn't happen because of an accident. It was an intentional policy to streamline, to accelerate, to move with speed in this moment. The Minister of Economic Development working together to get a processing fund to end the ripping and shipping of our resources. This is a whole-of-government effort to stand up for our ethical resources, productive workers, and our country at a critical time. Because at PDAC, the world saw firsthand, we are the world's reliable partner.
Back to the member for Renfrew, Nipissing, Pembroke.
Well, thank you to the Minister for his response. Speaker, early-stage exploration is high-risk, capital-intensive, and increasingly competitive, with jurisdictions around the world competing for the same investment. Unlocking Ontario's full mineral potential will require getting major projects moving in the north, and that includes infrastructure from roads to transmission lines. Speaker, our government has a plan to end that delay. That means finally building roads to unleash the north's true potential, including in mineral-rich regions like the Ring of Fire. Speaker, can the Minister explain how Ontario is supporting exploration and how our government is advancing nation-building opportunities in the Ring of Fire?
Back to the Minister of Energy and Mines.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. We want to supercharge our economy and help bolster self-reliance. We really need a new pipeline of new mines in this province. We have 36 today, blessed with 36 mines in the province, 30 more anticipated over the coming decade. But it's clear we need to support and incentivize prospectors to explore and identify the next big discovery in the north. And that's why in Sudbury, with the parliamentary assistant, we announced a plan to launch the Ontario Junior Exploration Program, supporting 68 early-stage projects. It was 20-odd years ago that explorers identified fast deposits in the Ring of Fire. That, too, was a prospector's initiative. And they unearthed or unlocked some of the largest multi-commodity undiscovered region on Earth. And it is our government's plan to get on with building. It was our Premier PDAC that announced a plan, a globally significant plan to accelerate the road to the construction of the Ring of Fire 5 years ahead of schedule, moving from exploration to extraction, getting on with building our economy.
Recognize the member for Hamilton Centre.
Madam Speaker, while this government had an extended break, health workers have been taking to the streets protesting cuts to hospital funding. It's truly stunning, Madam Speaker, that more than 1,000 patients are cared for in hospital hallways each day, and yet this government decided to take that problem and make it worse. Let's talk about what this means for a community in Scarborough. A patient admitted to a Scarborough hospital already spends more than 21 hours waiting for a hospital bed, and a bed might actually mean a hallway stretcher. To the Minister of Health, why are you wasting millions of dollars on advertisements rather than giving our hospitals the resources for everyone to simply have a hospital bed when they need it?
I recognize the Minister of Health.
Thank you, Speaker. So I'm not sure what the member opposite has been doing in the last three months, but I can tell you in January alone, we were able to make announcements to mark 1-year milestone in primary care attachments in the province of Ontario, a 10% increase in what we expected, which was 300,000 people attached to a primary care provider. Also in January, 16 teaching clinics that are going to ensure that our students who are practicing in medicine are actually going to get an opportunity in community to, again, connect more than 300,000 patients to primary care clinicians. Heart hubs, homelessness, addiction and recovery treatment hubs in Sault Ste. Marie, in Sudbury, in regions across Ontario, because we know when we offer pathways and hope, then they get the opportunity to actually get better. That's what we've been doing in the last 3 months. I'm not going to presume what you've been doing.
Back to the member for Hamilton Central.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm not sure what the Minister of Health has been doing for the last 3 months, but it sure as hell wasn't working in a hospital. And Madam Speaker, the minister should know that the best...
I'm going to ask the member to withdraw.
Withdraw. And Madam Speaker, the minister should know that the best advertisement for healthcare would be an open sign on every single rural ER. Yep. But instead, this government continues to underinvest in healthcare and instead prioritize reckless spending on ads and vanity projects. The people of Ontario are not fooled by your ridiculous ads that you're paying for with their tax dollars. They know the realities. Long wait times, hallway healthcare, closed signs on rural ERs, and valued health workers laid off. To the Minister of Health, when will you stop throwing money at private for-profit companies and instead ensure that our public hospitals have the resources to shorten wait times and eliminate hallway healthcare once and for all?
Recognize the Minister of Health.
Thank you, Speaker. I think it's important to remind the member opposite that since our government was formed, we've actually increased healthcare funding to hospital partners by over 50%. We have been a partner with our hospital agencies to make sure that they have the funds necessary to ensure they can hire high-quality staff. I am never going to talk down the healthcare system in the province of Ontario, because I look at Sick Kids Hospital that just got acknowledged as the #1 pediatric hospital in the world. I I look at UHN, the #2 publicly funded hospital in the world. Listen, we have world-class healthcare in the province of Ontario. We're investing in our students, we're investing in our people, and we're investing in our hospitals, and I am proud to be a member of our government that is doing that work. Thank you.
Question. I recognize the member for Don Valley North.
Well, thank you, Speaker. Speaker, my question is to the Minister of Children, Community and Social Services. Speaker, through the government's own actions, it's made one thing abundantly clear, and that's supporting children with special needs and autism is clearly not its priority. Instead, this government has chosen to pursue a political agenda in schools, while tens of thousands of children with autism are waiting for core clinical services. Through you, Speaker, is the minister willing to be the lone voice in the Conservative benches to stand with children with autism and the protesters on the front lawn right now, or will he continue to sit quietly and do nothing?
Recognize the Minister of Children, Community and Social Services.
Very much, Madam Speaker. And I thank the honourable member for the question. I don't know what he means by sitting quietly. There hasn't been a louder caucus in the history of this province than this Premier and this caucus standing up for the parents and students in this province, Madam Speaker. And that's what it takes when you listen to families, Madam Speaker, right? Because when we formed government, a total of 8,000 families across the province were receiving supports and services under the previous Liberal government. It was this Premier, it was this caucus that says that's not enough. And that came as a result of listening to families, of working with service providers, and doubling the investment of the Ontario Autism Program from $300 million to $600 million, Madam Speaker. We weren't done. We said we weren't done. There's more to do, which is why in last year's budget, thanks to the Premier, thanks to the Minister of Finance, thanks to the President of the Treasury Board, an increase of an additional $175 million, bringing our total to $779 million. What has it done, Madam Speaker, as a result of 8,000 in total across the province receiving supports and services to now nearly 45,000 families?
Recognize the member for Don Valley North.
Speaker, the minister mentioned listening. Well, if he listened closely to the voices outside on the front lawn of the legislature right now, he would hear the truth. Speaker, what we're seeing now is not an accident. This is a political choice. The Conservatives made promises to families of children with autism, and they broke them. Instead of delivering services, it's left over 67,000. Listen to that number, 67,000 children on a wait list while families are forced to fend for themselves. Speaker, this is a choice. You had 8 years. This government is choosing not to act. So through you, Speaker, will the minister admit that this crisis is the result of this government's broken promises and commit finally, yes or no, to clearing the wait list?
Back to the Minister for response.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. And again, I thank the honourable colleague for the question. You know, when it comes to listening, Madam Speaker, talks about 15 years they were in power. 15 years. They never listened to families. That's why there were only 8,000 families. Madam Speaker, they were only receiving support through one street. One. Today, families, upon registering with and being on the service registry, can access programs, supports and services immediately, accessing programs like urgent response, caregiver-mediated program, entry to school, foundational family services, and an expanded core service which now includes occupational therapy, speech-language pathology, mental health supports that never existed before, and of course, IBI, Madam Speaker. That's what it takes when you listen to the community. That's what it takes to families. The member knows I talk to 5 to 10 to 15 families every single day because that's what the Premier standard is serving the people as best as we can, and that requires us working with service providers and listening to parents because they know what's best for their families. And we'll continue.
The member for Essex.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. My question is for the Minister of Economic Development, Job Creation and Trade. President Trump's tariffs have disrupted the supply chains that businesses in my riding of Essex and across the province have relied on. That is why our government is stepping up and providing $30 billion worth of tariff relief and support to protect Ontario workers and businesses. I had the privilege of joining the minister and the member from Windsor-Tecumseh to announce companies that our government is supporting through the Ontario Together Trade Fund. Our government is sending a clear message. We will not back down in the face of tariffs coming from south of the border. Speaker, can the minister tell this House how the Ontario Together Trade Fund is protecting jobs and helping Ontario businesses during this time of global economic uncertainty?
I recognize the Minister of Economic Development and Trade.
Speaker, thank you. The $150 million Ontario Together Trade Fund is helping companies on the front lines of this trade war. This program is helping businesses onshore products and make them here in Ontario instead of the U.S. and find new markets all around the world. We announced the latest projects with members from Essex and Windsor-Tecumseh. 8 Windsor area companies invested $44 million and created 65 new jobs, protected the 692 jobs they already had, from auto parts suppliers to manufacturers of critical components. Those 8 firms are doubling down right here in Ontario. With President Trump continuing his threats to our industries, our support for tariff-impacted businesses is unwavering. Speaker, we're not stopping here. We look forward to announcing more job-creating investments in the coming weeks.
Supplementary, the member for Essex.
Madam Speaker, I thank the minister for that answer. The Ontario Together Trade Fund is supporting businesses in my riding of Essex and also across Ontario. For example, Ricoh International, an automation and machining company manufacturing large critical automation parts, is investing $6.4 million in the riding of Essex. Their investment is creating 41 new jobs and protecting 71 existing jobs. In nearby Windsor-Tecumseh, Kringer Industrial, who produces materials and packaging for the cargo and transport industry, is investing $1.4 million. Supported by the Ontario Together Trade Fund, businesses in Essex and across the province of Ontario are strengthening domestic capacity and reducing our reliance on foreign inputs and seizing new opportunities here at home. Speaker, can the minister explain to the members opposite why the Ontario Together Trade Fund is essential for Ontario's economy?
Minister of Economic Development and Trade.
Thank you, Speaker. Well, the Ontario Together Trade Fund to date has supported 23 Ontario companies, and those 23 companies have invested $267 million of their money. They have protected and created 2,884 jobs. Speaker, we are working to deliver real support for those tariff-impacted workers so they can emerge from this once-in-a-generation trouble stronger than ever before. We're reducing our dependence on U.S. goods and services. Every single day, companies are onshoring and building products here in Ontario that we had not made. They're diversifying. They're making a resilient economy to help weather this economic uncertainty. And that means us helping them create those new customers in Europe, Asia, and across Canada.
The member for Mushkegowuk, James Bay.
Question for the Minister of Transportation.
Like to Timmins, there were 2 collisions on Highway 11, which left the highway closed from Smooth Rock Falls to Kapuskasing and also in Valgagne. We know in 2024, Highway 11 closed 363 times. Can the minister tell us how many times Highway 11 closed in 2025?
Minister of Transportation.
Very much, Madam Speaker. We continue to make historic investments into northern highways like the 11 and the 17 highway, which by the fact, Madam Speaker, that member has voted against every single time, including the investments into winter clearance, Madam Speaker, whether it's over $100 million that we invest with deploying over 1,400 pieces of equipment on those roads. That member has stood up and voted against every single one of those investments that we have put forward. We continue to work with authorities there, or winter maintenance cleaners there, to ensure that we have safe highways, and will continue to do better and ensure that we improve and invest in Highway 11 and Highway 17.
Back to the member for Mushkegowuk, James Bay.
Madame la Speaker. Monsieur le Ministre.
Minister, my question.
How many times the highway closed in 2025? And you spoke about us not supporting your bills. We brought bill after bill that would save people, that would keep our highways open. And you all voted against them.
Right.
So we have no lesson to take from you, Minister.
That's right.
I'm going to give you another opportunity to respond, Minister. Sadly, Minister, we lost a lot of people on our highways. Can the Minister tell us how many people lost their lives on Highway 11 this year?
Answer the question.
I recognize the Minister of Transportation. Order. Order. I apologize to the Minister. Order. 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 I recognize the Minister of Transportation. Order.
Let's look at the record of that member on voting for northern highways. Whether it's Highway 11, the 2+1 pilot, that member has voted against it. Now let's talk about enforcement on those highways. We've hired 99 additional transportation enforcement officers with a focus on the north. Guess what? When that member had an opportunity to stand up and invest in more safety and more officers in the north, more transportation scales in the north, that member voted against it every single time, Madam Speaker. When that member had an opportunity to vote to support the increases in winter maintenance funding, that member voted against it. When it's an opportunity to vote to support the expansion of Highway 11 and the 2+1 pilot, the studies, the reports, and the investment, the shovels that are going to go into the ground, that member has voted against it every single time. We're going to continue to ensure that we invest in the north. We're going to continue to ensure that we build Highway 11, build Highway 17, and I hope that member steps up.
Members, may I have your attention? Members, it's our first day back. I have no problem naming members, and you will be asked to leave. I recognize the member for Ajax.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is for the Premier. The Premier's had 8 years to protect Ontario's economy, yet we have the second highest provincial unemployment rate. And in January, Ontario lost 67,000 jobs. So in Amherstburg, when the Crown Royal plant closed, the Premier made a big show out of it, pouring out Crown Royal live on TV, and talked tough. He said he was going to protect Ontario, those workers, and their jobs. But he hung out those workers in Windsor, Essex, and southwestern Ontario. He hung them out to dry. There are companies that are ready to buy that Crown Royal plant to create new jobs there. So why did the Premier not use his leverage and require the plant be sold as part of the province's deal with Diageo?
Minister of Economic Development and Trade.
Thank you, Speaker. President Trump's tariffs sparked an unprecedented global economic uncertainty and has disrupted all of our supply chains. Our government stepped up with $30 billion in supports to help businesses protect those jobs, measures that both the NDP and the Liberals voted against. We're seeing that resilience, though, Speaker. 59,000 new jobs were created just in the fourth quarter of 2025.
Member for Windsor West will come to order.
Speaker, I had said 59,000.
Member for Windsor West will come to order.
Speaker, I had said 59,000 jobs were created just in the last quarter of 2025. In fact, $44 million in investments were announced from 8 manufacturing companies, as I mentioned, in the Windsor area just a couple of weeks ago. Their investments continue to reshore supply chains and create new jobs there. Speaker, we are protecting the businesses, the workers, and building a more resilient economy.
Back to the member for Ajax.
Thank you, Speaker. That's a lot of talk. The province had an opportunity to protect jobs in Windsor-Essex. The province had an opportunity to require that plant that Diageo had be sold to either one of the interesting buyers or included as part of the deal. The province chose not to. So not only does the Premier not know how to pour out a bottle of whiskey, he didn't fight for those same very workers he promised to protect. But it's not just there. In Sault Ste. Marie, layoffs at Algoma Steel, they're starting today. That's 1,000 families wondering what is going to be next. And while the federal government has been stepping up, Ontario, once again, it's nowhere to be found, and frankly, riding on the coattails of the feds. This is an out-of-touch Ontario Conservative government, hoping someone else will do the heavy lifting. So, Speaker, is the Premier asleep at the switch, or is he going to say, call me on my cell phone?
Minister of Economic Development.
Speaker, it is rich to hear this member stand and talk about this, considering they campaigned on not hiring 4,000 jobs in Pickering, losing those jobs, campaigning against the $41 billion refurbishment in nuclear in Pickering. So it's very rich to hear him suggest that. Meanwhile, we have created 1 million new jobs since getting elected, and we're doing everything to protect and build on this progress. We're providing immediate supports to help these businesses, Speaker, and that's why we're able to land companies from around the world like Sandvik in Sudbury, Massili, $85 million investment in Brantford. Speaker, our goal has been very clear from the beginning. More investment, more jobs, more wins for Ontario workers.
I recognize the member from Markham-Unionville.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is for the Minister of Labour, Immigration, Training and Skill Development. For over a year, U.S. tariffs have disrupted key Canadian industries, including steel, automotive, manufacturing and forestry. In Ontario, these pressures are affecting workers who build our roads, ships, hospitals and communities. Speaker, unlike the Liberals and NDP, who continue to vote against measures that protect our province, our government is taking action. We are taking bold, critical investment in Ontario, including historic $220 billion commitment to protect Ontario's workers. Speaker, can the minister tell the House how our government is continuing to support workers and protect critical industries impacted by the U.S. tariffs?
I recognize the member for Mississauga, Aaron Mills.
Thank you. Thank you, Speaker, and I thank the member for the question. Earlier this month, I joined the Federal Minister for Jobs and Families in Ottawa to announce an over $228 million investment over the next 3 years through Skills Advanced Ontario. This program will help up to 27,000 workers retain, upgrade their skills, and stay competitive in key sectors such as softwood lumber, steel, and automotive manufacturing. These investments mean a steel worker in Sault Ste. Marie can upgrade welding certification to adapt to new technologies, or an auto part supplier in Oakville can upskill in workforce to spur innovation and to stay globally competitive. Applications for Skills Advanced Ontario are now open, and eligible workers, job seekers, and employers can learn more by contacting the Ministry. We are ready to get the work and ensure Ontario remain competitive resilient, and self-reliant
Response.
for years to come. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Back to the member for Markham Union Bench.
Thank you, Speaker, and thank you to the parliamentary assistants to the Minister for the update. As we continue to navigate the economic uncertainty created by ongoing tariff pressures, many workers across Ontario are understandably looking for new opportunities, new skills, and new pathways to stable employment. Speaker, these workers are backbone of our communities and deserve access to high-quality training, career support, and resources that will help them recover quickly and confidently. Our government has been clear that supporting workers is central to strengthening our economy, especially during these challenging times. Through you, Speaker, could the PA to the Minister share how our government is continuing to support and to protect Ontario's workers?
Back to the member for Mississauga, Erin Mills.
Thank you, Speaker, and I thank the member again for that important question. Skills Advance Ontario is just one of many tools our government is using to support and protect Ontario workers. We launched major investments in power centres to ensure affected workers can access help quickly and reconnect to employment faster, supporting thousands of people in communities across the province. We strengthened Better Jobs Ontario with significant new funding to help more individuals retain for in-demand, better-paying jobs, with substantial financial support available for eligible participants. And through the Working for Workers 7, we made history by passing into law Canada's first job-seeking leave for employers impacted by mass layoffs, and ensuring workers are automatically referred to employment services when they need them most. When workers need help, our government's right there beside them, making sure they receive the services, training and support required to get back into their feet and into meaningful work as quickly as possible. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Recognize the Government House Leader.
Thanks, Speaker. Speaker, if you seek it, you'll find unanimous consent to put forward a motion without notice for the arrangement of proceedings for debate on concurrence and supply.
The Government House Leader is seeking unanimous consent to put forward a motion without notice regarding the arrangement of proceedings for debate on concurrence and supply. Agreed? Agreed. I recognize the Government House Leader.
Speaker, I move that notwithstanding any standing order, the orders for concurrence and supply for the various ministries and offices as represented by Government Orders 9 through 38 inclusive shall be called concurrently, and that when such orders are called, they shall be considered concurrently in a single debate.
The Government House Leader moves that notwithstanding any standing order, the orders for concurrence and supply for the various ministries and offices as represented by Government Orders 9 through 38, inclusive, shall be called concurrently, and that when such orders are called, they shall be considered concurrently in a single debate. Is it the pleasure of the House that the motion carry? Carried. There being no further business, this House stands in recess until 1 p.m.